G'day, I'm Josh Niland. We're here at Fish Butchery, Waterloo. We're going to do a little demonstration into how we would process a whole fish and go through the many variables involved so that we get the full return back from one single fish. One of the critical points that I've tried to implement in the Fish Butchery book is the fact that we should stop washing our fish under a tap. I had to use the beautiful illustration from Reg Mombasa in this occasion to really depict what it looks like to run water over a fish, and it really does show the flesh falling away from the bones. Washing a fish is the one single thing that will compromise the texture, the shelf life, and the overarching aesthetic of a fish. We're starting off with a fantastic wild kingfish, and we're going to show you, I suppose, a very traditional method for scaling where you actually use a knife instead of using the abrasive scaler. It removes the potential of bruising the flesh. Not only are you cutting the scale out, but you're cutting the membrane that the scale sits in. By cutting the membrane off, there's never a chance that any moisture can sit on the surface. Let's get started. And it's just a matter of finding that angle that allows you to get between the scale and sit on top of the skin. That's the many hours that gets you to a stage where you can take that off without puncturing the fish. Now that we've got completely scaled kingfish, then we go along, and what I do is I cut these fins off just to make the task of cutting a little simpler. Starting with basic gutting. I'm using quite a long knife, but the objective is just to use the very top of it, just because if I go in and use a long length, then what happens is I cut all of the organs inside, and it removes the opportunity of what we could do with that organs if it wasn't damaged. So when you go in, just very small amount of the knife, and then you follow the natural seam that you can see. And then I use scissors at this junction point, which holds the two collars in place. There's quite a firm piece of bone. I cut to go through there, and then we can expose the actual organs of the fish, and I can continue to make this cut go up underneath the jaw. I'll use scissors to firstly just take out the heart, and the reason I do that is because that's the very small organ that will probably cop the most amount of damage from a sharp knife. And I put my hands underneath the gills so that I can separate the gill away from the back of its head. And now I'm cutting just underneath the jaw, which then separates the head from the gill. And then again, there's another seam here where the gill is hanging onto. So I want to cut the gill away from the spine. So down that goes there. We have to be conscious that the gill is still attached to the collars. So the blade goes in and sweeps around, and again on this side sweeps around. So now the collars are free, and now it's a matter of grabbing onto the gills and with a little bit of force pulling out the organs in one piece. Now this isn't as scary as what you usually see. This is very organized and very clean. There's no blood everywhere, there's no water on the floor, and more to the point, there's no odor. You've got a beautiful smell of the ocean. What we're looking at here now is obviously the gills, and then in terms of the organ makeup, we've got the beautiful liver at the top. In behind that, you've got this white organ here, which is the stomach. Underneath here, you've got the intestines, which very, very similar to the stomach, carries a heap of gelatine. In behind those intestines, you can see this dark organ here, which is the spleen. So we're going to show you a technique that we put forward in the Fish Butchery book, which is butterflying. And if you can do it with a big fish, you can do it with a small fish and everything in between. So this isn't a species-dependent cut. So you don't need this fish specifically that I've got in front of me to execute it. And it just gives you the opportunity to get a really nice crispy skin on a grill or even in the oven. So we're going to take this fish in our hand. I open up the cavity of the fish, and using my scissors, I pop the scissor down next to the spine. So I stick to the left-hand side of the spine firstly, and then again on the right-hand side. What we've done now is created two little pathways for the blade to go down both sides. The tension than a knife has against a bone can often send the knife in a different direction, and oftentimes you miss too much flesh, and at the end you've got more flesh sitting on the bone that you're taking out than the flesh that needs to still be there on the fillet. Once we've made those cuts, we go to a knife, and working down the cut that you've already made, angle the blade back down towards the spine, and we continue the cut that we've made with the scissor, and we work our way down. And you can see the frame of the fish. And then it's a matter of rolling over this spine, and the same at the top, staying as close to the bone. Once you've got one fillet down, take a cleaver, who said it wasn't fish butchery, and go down the head, because I want to leave the head on this cut. Pull that down, and we flatten that out. And then what I'll do is I'll turn this over. And so where I started on the inside on the last one, now we're going to start the other way and get the bone out from this side. So blade goes in. Again, staying very close to the bone, angling the blade to the frame. And the objective is to not put a hole in the top of the fish. So now that I've made that cut, I'm going to turn it back over and then get my scissors back again. I'll crack first. So between the vertebrae, the scissor goes, and then we can cut this little part of the tail. I'm just going to snip our way down. Okay, so the spine comes out. Now that we have the spine taken out, we're looking at something that is very much butterflied, but what we want to try and do is pick up all of this cartilage that sits through the middle. So all I do is go along and give it all a good trim so that we don't have any bones that will get in the way of totally enjoying this fish. Okay, all the little cartilage comes out. The next thing is to remove the ribs. So the ribs sit on top of the belly, and what the ribs do is they actually sit with the pin bone. The pin attaches itself to the rib. Sounds weird, but you listen for the pin bones breaking off the rib, and that helps you know that you're on the right direction so that you can get all these bones out. Blade goes in, all those little clicks were the pin bones breaking off the rib, meaning now that I can sweep these ribs out, and you can see all the little rib bones. And so on a larger fish, this has the opportunity of being marinated in barbecue sauce, being smoked, being grilled, and then eating it almost like pork ribs. So another part of the fish that you shouldn't throw away. There's opportunity that lies in there. And then repeat on this other side. And you probably notice that I'm using a blade that's facing the ceiling. If I was to just go in this way and push, the same reason I use scissors. You're trying to create little pathways that the blade can enter into so that there's no variability in where the blade ends up, because some of these cuts can end up with, cuts in your hands rather than cuts on the fish. So blade goes in, and then we follow the cut that we've already made. And when we're taking these rib bones out, I'm angling the blade up towards the bone with my fingers on top. And I know that the blade can't come out because the bones are protecting my fingers. Okay. Next, ribs out. I suppose the worst job now is pulling the bones out. We always use these fine nose pliers for nearly all the species that we do here at Fish Butchery. And in the book, we've included a section on tools. So we're trying to give you an understanding of what type of scissors, what type of pliers, and the types of knives that we use. You don't need to invest your life savings in the form of a knife. You just need one that's sharp, and you need one that feels comfortable. When you're pin boning a fish, there's no real romance to this at all. The objective is pull the really tiny fine bone out of the fish. So you've got this quite a long bone that sits within the fillet. Important that we get this out because most of our worst childhood memories lies within one of these bones. When taking them out, what we want to be doing, I put my finger underneath the fillet to help promote the bones to sit up. I use my other finger to help it stand up slightly so you can see the head of it. And then just a matter of luck and coaxing it out So that's it there as it comes out. The biggest challenge is that when we get frustrated and when it becomes hard to pull these bones out, we keep pulling at the same spot, and we often make a big trough and a big well where the bone sits. And I think you do need to show a little patience. If the pliers aren't working out for you, the other simple solution of getting bones out is by using a knife to draw down one side here and then marry that cut up on the other side into a little V cut. So it comes down just beneath the bone, and that V cut coming together can then be pulled out in one piece, and so you can cut the bones out completely. That's a quick way, but obviously a way that removes a little bit more of the fish's flesh rather than just the bone. So obviously this is just one example of the cuts that's in fish butchery, and some that are very, I suppose, abstract and a little bit more aligned to meat-based preparations than fish. No matter what the fish you have in front of you, there will be a cut within that book giving you some outlook so that you don't always have to lean on just using the fillet. A lot of the cuts within the book actually use a bone associated with the cut, which then means you're able to give somebody something more flavorful because you've cooked against the bone. Looking at fish as an animal really gives me clarity as to what can be achieved with one single fish, and showing you this breakdown gives you a little insight into what's possible. So firstly, two beautiful fillets attached in the center, and then at the top the collars of the fish, which to me I always think of as being almost like the working muscle or the chicken thigh. You know, a beautiful part that can take slightly more heat because the bone is surrounding it, and there's some darker flesh in there that has some more fat. The head, obviously there's beautiful pieces of meat that sits all within the cheeks and around the neck of the fish. Really delicious, and nice that it's included on this whole piece, because if we were butterflying and taking the square out of the middle, it would be hard to identify what the specific species is. It's important that we create the surface area so that when it goes onto the hot grill, you're getting this beautiful blistered, crispy skin on the outside. So we can look at this as the primary cut, and then we look at all of this as the secondaries. So starting firstly with the bone that we took out of the fish, beyond stock, there is so much opportunity there to make not only flavored oils and liquids, but also to go down and make ceramics out of it. There's the opportunity to make bone china. There's the ability to make glazes in ceramics to go around the outside of a plate, which at St. Peter we've been fortunate to work with Sam Gordon now out of Victoria to produce these beautiful plates for us using the bones from fish butchery. In addition to that, the idea that you can think of bones as eggs loosely. So we're making pasta out of the bone puree. Next is all the soft organs. So the heart and the spleen can be preserved and salted. The liver, beautiful product for making pâtés and terrines. The eyes, there's endless possibilities there as well. Something that we're only starting to scratch the surface on now. We've included in the book an ice cream that's made out of fish eye. This one here is the stomach, a very compromised part of the fish, something that I suppose strikes fear into a lot of people, including myself, to be honest. On the first time, we had to do some real thinking around what could be achieved with not just the stomach, but the intestines. And by salting, we remove the impurities, and then steaming makes it nice and soft. And then we have the ability of incorporating it into stews and braises. Could even go one step further and dry that product out after it's steamed to then deep fry it and make it almost like a pork crackling, something like a chicharron that you would puff. The romance and the season and the wonder of a wild fish still exists, and fish butchery is the intentional practice of generating more from one single fish than just its two fillets.